Trump has no self-censorship of that kind. He's not happy with the fact that he's tripped up over a word. This comes out quite often. He just gives off so much the impression of being ignorant and stupid. But one thing, but this right back, naughty school kid, I didn't do it. Think of him as somebody who expresses himself not like a politician, who expresses himself like a normal person. I think it is an attempt to cover it up because he has nothing else to add. It's a way of not exactly abdicating from responsibility, but perhaps softening some of the things that he's doing. I'm Dr. Geoff Lindsey. My area is phonetics and linguistics. I spend a lot of time looking at speech. I've been an academic working for several universities, mainly associated with University College London. I now have an honorary position there, and I'm also a YouTuber.
People are very concerned with regard to South Africa, and that's really the purpose of the meeting, and we'll see how that turns out. But we have many people that feel they're being persecuted, and they're coming to the United States. So we take from many locations.
And we take from many locations. He breaks and starts again. And that's something that Trump does in various kinds of ways a lot, this self-interrupting or changing gear. Trump has all these different ways of changing gear, interrupting himself, resetting or repeating himself. Whether it's deliberate is always a hard thing to say. I suspect it's just part of who he is. But it's definitely one of the things I think that makes him different from a lot of other politicians who always want to sound prepared, so that even when they're extemporizing, they like to sound official and scripted. Trump has no self-censorship of that kind. And one of the things that makes him sound spontaneous is these, as I've just done now, stopping, making a restart. It makes you sound less prepared, it makes you sound more spontaneous. And I'm absolutely sure that this is one of the things that his base likes, even if they wouldn't think about it consciously. I'm sure that they think of him as somebody who expresses himself not like a politician, who expresses himself like a normal person. And interrupting yourself and repeating yourself like this is, we all do it, except maybe most politicians try not to.
If we feel there's persecution or genocide going on.
Of course, he increases his volume there to say genocide. Sometimes he's even more exaggerated in the way that he picks out individual words, uses quite extreme facial expressions.
Do you think it's a tactic, or do you think that's just him?
I think the whole question of whether anything is a tactic with Donald Trump is particularly difficult. It's difficult with all of us. But in speech and language, it's very easy to think that other people are doing things deliberately or are doing things one way because they can't do it another way. People will say, oh, that person can't pronounce a particular sound. But speech and language are really quite unconscious things. We acquire them in early life, and people like me, strange people like me, spend years and years and years analysing things and becoming very conscious of them. But most people are not so conscious. With Trump, one of the ways that he interrupts himself is clearly conscious. And this is when he's reading from teleprompters. And I'd say, my personal opinion is that he's not very good at reading from teleprompters, and it's always very, very obvious when he is, because it's not like his normal talking like a regular guy kind of speech. And when Trump sees something on the teleprompter that reminds him of something, strikes a chord, allows him to make a self-aggrandizing reference or to make a point that will go down well with his base, he grabs it. And immediately, instead of looking to one side or the other, to the teleprompter, he starts looking forward and speaking spontaneously. And that's clearly a self-interrupting strategy that's more conscious. In a sense, he's not interrupting himself, he's interrupting the teleprompter script.
And we had a lot of people. I must tell you, Mr. President, we have had a tremendous number of people.
Of course, Trump repeats himself a lot of people, a tremendous number of people.
Especially since they've seen this, She's very bad for New York, but I really don't know too much about it, but I appreciate the question. Thank you very much. Generally, they're white farmers, and they're fleeing South Africa, and it's a very sad thing to see.
So Trump there says it's a very sad thing to see. That air in sad is trap raising, as we call it, raising the vowel that's in the word trap. Actually, of course, trap is one of the words where he wouldn't do it because it depends on the final consonant in the word. So trap, which comes out in the way I would pronounce it, roughly, but in many words, including ones ending in D, like sad.
It's a very sad thing. Sad.
Also gasoline.
Gas.
It's more like air. And that's something that you get in New York.
We can have an explanation of that because I know you don't want that.
He says you don't want that, and that gets the more typical pronunciation compared with sad.
You know, it's a kind of a different meeting. Normally we have meetings, we talk about trade, and we'll be talking about trade another.
We'll be talking about trade. We'll be talking about trade. It's, again, he repeats himself, but at a higher pitch. The self-interruptions where Trump changes his pitch register and his level, his volume, and goes into a sort of higher, more quiet tone of voice. This is something that's picked up on by impressionists like the guy on SNL, James Austin Johnson. Brilliant Trump impression, where in a way, there's a big contrast with the more aggressive Trump, the more shouty Trump. And I don't know whether there's any degree of calculation in this, but Trump seems to me, especially if you compare second term with first term, to talk quietly more of the time. I don't know whether it's about energy levels or maybe I'm missing something, but it seems to me there's quite a lot of this gentle speech, holding back, reticent. It's not to do with me, or I don't know, that kind of thing, which seems to be in counterpoint to some of the very, very clearly dramatic and drastic policies that his administration is responsible for.
Many people that feel they're being persecuted and they're coming to the United States. So we take from many locations if we feel there's persecution or genocide going on.
I don't know about his choice of the word genocide, but I think white genocide is a particular phrase that his administration has gone for. Where all these things come from, whether they're all from Trump, Make America Great Again being the most famous one of all, whether he has a team that supplies some of these, or whether it's just his incredible instinct for catching people's attention with something. Maybe it came from him. I don't know. But I think white genocide is an official hashtag for his administration, isn't it?
We have made a decision. We'll be announcing it very soon, and it'll be 25%.
We have made a decision. We'll be announcing it very soon. This is the other kind of list. This is the kind of list that I call planned. Which gives an impression of control. It's not a list that might go on and on and on and you don't know where it's going to end. He's saying we're going to do this and we're going to do this, and it's all completely under control and it's all in my power. And eventually you get to the end. But to show it's controlled, this series of rises works quite well.
Generally speaking, and that'll be on cars and all other things. And European Union is a different case than Canada, different kind of case. They've really taken advantage of us in a different way.
Trump has what we call the court distinction. Millions of people in the northeastern United States have the court distinction, meaning the vowels in those two words are different as they are for me.
The job of the U.S. Armed Forces is not to host. The job is not. They've offered all that they had. They've offered all. The job is not. They've offered all.
I point it out because the majority of people in North America don't have the court distinction. They have the same vowel in both words. Sleeping in a cart, and I cart the ball. So, but Trump has it, and that's not unusual at all for somebody from the part of the world that he's from. But there's a thing called the on line in the northeastern US, where people above the on line tend to say on with the cot vowel, and people below the line tend to say on with the cot vowel. Trump's from New York, where you'd expect people to say on, but he doesn't. He says on cars, so that's Trump.
The European Union's it was formed in order to screw the United States. I mean, look, let's be honest. The European Union was formed in order to screw the United States. That's the purpose of it.
So that's a wonderful clip for demonstrating intonation contours, because in succession, he gives beautiful examples of a couple of intonation contours. The first time he uses what I call the Thatcher down step. The European Union was formed to screw the United States.
It was formed in order to screw the United States. To screw the United States. United States of America. States of America.
So this is a pattern with a low fall at the end, a down-stepped fall at the end, which Margaret Thatcher used quite a lot. The overwhelming majority of people formed to screw the United States. Not quite her choice of words, but that's it gives a certain kind of gravitas. And the old voiceover man in American trailers, Hollywood trailers, used to do it. You know, come on a journey, one man, the story of a man, the journey of a lifetime. It's that down step, which can sound patronizing or it can sound sit back and relax. So that's one pattern. Then immediately he switches to a different pattern. He switches to what's called the surprise redundancy contour by some people. And here he's using it in the redundancy sense. Redundancy in the sense that you don't need to be saying this. It's so obvious. So the European Union was formed to screw the United States. That's the Thatcher down step. And then it was formed to screw the United States. This da-da-da-da-da-da-da. We often do this to show that something's obvious. You ought to know about that already. So he switches gear there to say exactly the same thing with a radically different intonation contour. This is also a pretty impressive example of one of the many Trumpian ways of interrupting himself or reinforcing something. Because he starts off comparing the European Union with Canada, and then he decides to make a much more dramatic point about the entire function of the European Union being to screw the United States. And the first time he decides to make that point, he does it with gravitas, with the Thatcher pattern, what I call the Thatcher pattern. And then he's on a roll now and wants to say not only is that arguably outrageous statement, not only does he believe it to be true, but he then wants to tell us that it's obviously true. So he uses the surprise redundancy contour.
It was formed in order to screw the United States. I mean,
screw the United States, yeah, it is. Come on a journey. Screw the United States.
I mean, look, let's be honest. The European Union was formed in order to screw the United States. That's the purpose of it. And they've done a good job of it, but now I'm president.
What will happen if these countries or the EU retaliate?
They can't. I mean, they can try, but they can't.
Yeah, that impressive comeback. You know, what if they retaliate? They can't. Yeah, it's just, I think one of the impressive things about Trump is he's never lost for words. But you know what? I actually think that is arguably the most interesting thing about him, because, you know, he just gives off so much the impression of being ignorant and stupid. But one thing, but this right back, it's whenever anybody says anything that's against him or potentially against him, or, you know, it's just this, it's the rapidity of the response.
But I'm very disappointed because Elon knew the inner workings of this bill.
Elon knew the inner workings of the bill. Trump will very often drop his chin or tuck his chin in. I mean, to one degree or another, a slight movement, or it could be sometimes a big movement. That seems to do it perhaps when he wants to add gravitas or make a point. But this tilt going from this position to this position is something you see a lot with Trump.
Cars of all types, electric, we want to have electric. India wants, you know, they're one of the highest taxed. What would be the price? He said, there is no price. Revere their incredible legacy. Of this bill, better than almost anybody sitting here, better than you people. He knew everything about it.
So I don't know whether that's a self-interruption, but it's more of a repetition. But as the idea about Elon knowing a lot about the bill is going through Trump's mind, he grabs the opportunity while it's there to say better than you people and sort of needle the press.
And he only developed the problem when he found out that we're going to have to cut the EV mandate, because that's billions and billions of dollars.
Yeah, cut the EV mandate. That's billions and billions. There's the chin tuck when he gets to the more serious point, like this, and then switches to like this, almost like he's looking over a pair of glasses.
And it really is unfair. We want to have cars of all types. Electric, we want to have electric, but we want to have
bigger one. We want to have electric. The chin tuck. I'm not any kind of body language expert, but if you think it's very often a switch from sort of looking up, which is when you look up at things, that means you're lower down, and I suppose there's some kind of exposure, and it's switching to a looking down and perhaps being more protected, less vulnerable. But there are all kinds of different flavors of it, but this dropping the chin. So as I say, I mean, to me, it's associated in my mind with like looking over a pair of glasses at somebody.
We gather today to honor the incredible service members who rest in glory in this cemetery and burial grounds around the world and in 1,000 lonely places known only to God. In every hour of peril, in every moment of crisis, American warriors have left behind the blessings of home and family to answer their nation's call.
This is that level listing intonation, like electric, combustion, hybrid. These lists that can go on and on and on, which you might use that kind of list for various kinds of reasons, but it gives that impression that the list could go on and on. And what we have is that on and on and on level tone being used by Trump as he reads from the teleprompter. And here it doesn't really seem to be a rhetorical use of that intonation at all. It just seems to me to be a reflection of him not being particularly comfortable with reading from a teleprompter. It's so different from the lively extemporizing Trump. This da 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 da. He's so effective at communicating in his way normally, but he really seems to be out of water when he's reading from a teleprompter. And I think that's why whenever an idea comes up on the teleprompter that he'd like to extemporize about, he just grabs the opportunity and his eyes go to the center and he's talking more directly to the audience in the way that he's much more comfortable with.
Gave us the freest, greatest, and most noble republic ever to exist on the face of the earth, a republic that I am fixing after a long and hard 4 years. That was a hard 4 years we went through.
So it's a classic example of seeing something on the teleprompter and deciding to extemporize about it. Even though he doesn't add anything there, he's just basically saying the same thing, but in a way that's more direct, that's looking forward and sounds more spontaneous. And since it gets a round of applause from the audience, he sticks with it. He stays extemporizing for a while.
Who would let that happen?
So he's off the teleprompter. He's comfortable now, and continuing to say things more spontaneously. And also we get an example of the gruff phonation or voice quality. Happen, which Trump uses a lot of on symbols that he wants to emphasize. He does this he can even do this in quite quiet styles of speech, but here it's one of those more aggressive ones.
Today we honor their memory. We remember their gallantry. We just revere in the highest sense, we just revere their incredible legacy.
We all stumble, we all trip up when we're speaking. I do a lot. But the thing that I find sort of slightly amusing here is that he stumbles over the word revere. I don't think that's particularly significant or important, but having stumbled, he then sort of covers it up by doing one of his extemporizing things where he doesn't actually have anything to say about it. It's just apparently to cover up the stumble rather than just repair, as we call it. I think he's not happy with the fact that he's tripped up over a word, you know, even though it's what we fallible humans do. I think it is an attempt to cover it up because he has nothing else to add to the word revere. It's like he's trying to pass it off as being deliberate. You know, I was going to stop reading the teleprompter there. I was going to reinforce the word revere, but of course it was just a stumble.
God bless our fallen heroes. May God bless our Gold Star families, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much, everybody. Great honor. Thank you.
United States of America. Thank you very much. So it's really quite remarkable for somebody who wants to make America great again, that he just throws the words United States of America kind of away and quickly gets on to thanking people to the great honor that's been given to him.
The job of the U.S. Armed Forces is not to host drag shows, to transform foreign cultures, but to spread democracy to everybody around the world at the point of a gun. The military's job is to dominate any foe and annihilate any threat to America, anywhere, anytime, and any place.
Yeah, the military's job is to dominate any foe. One of the characteristics of Trump's voice is hyponasality, undernasality, or what might be called more crudely a sort of blocked nose or a slightly blocked nose sound. And it's there more some places than others, but here when he says any foe, it sounds more like some poor guy called Eddie Foe. That's the job of the American military, is to dominate poor Eddie or whoever he is.
But if the United States or its allies are ever threatened or attacked, the Army will obliterate our opponents with overwhelming strength and devastating force. That's why my administration has begun a colossal buildup of the United States Armed Forces.
I mean, that's very, very dramatic stuff to be talking about in a never-ending monotone like this. But Trump just isn't, I think, comfortable reading from the teleprompter.
From New York, from Washington, from a different place. These are great people. You know, you have to view them as people. And I don't want it to be a violent thing, but...
I don't want it to be a violent thing. That intonation contour has a specific name in the literature, which is the contradiction contour, obvious in meaning. And Trump uses this pattern quite a lot because he very often is responding to criticisms or things that are challenging him, and this comes out quite often.
But they're not going to have a nuclear weapon.
But you said it was close the other day. You said it was close to a deal.
I think it's close. I think,
so does that mean that they're going to
make
enrich at any level, like a civilian level?
No, I think they want to make a deal.
The normal association of some of Trump's rhetorical habits, you would associate them with defensiveness. But in Trump's case, it's almost like he's quoting them. That's not the typical kind of intonation pattern that you'd expect a powerful politician to use. It sounds a little bit more like a naughty school kid. I didn't do it. But it doesn't make him seem weak, I think, because it's got these quotes around it. I think he often wants to give the impression, not always, but he quite often wants to give the impression that he couldn't do anything else, that something isn't his fault, that he has no choice but to do something. And so I think there's something, you could call it deliberate. It's a way of not exactly abdicating from responsibility, but perhaps softening some of the things that he's doing by making them say, well, it's just reasonable, or it's not that, it's something else.
And he said, your country has been very good to us. I would love to do something to help with this situation you have with Air Force One. I said, that's nice. What do you suggest? And he suggested this. And I said, you know what? That's very nice. That's very nice. I appreciate it. What would be the price? He said, there is no price. I said, that's nice. Now, this plane's not for me. This goes to the United States Air Force for whoever is president.
That's very nice. I appreciate it. That sometimes he goes into this high, slightly breathy, gentle way of speaking. It certainly makes a contrast with the sometimes more belligerent way of talking. It's certainly very gentle. It's a very soft way of speaking. And I think, like some of the other things, it's got quotes around it. It's, you know, see somebody as big and powerful as me, capable of the aggression that I'm capable of. I can just switch into these, you know, it's very nice. It's switching into this much weaker, or the word I was using is gentle, because it's the choice of a strong person not to be strong and belligerent.